Please get ready for a dictation of a passage taken from the NCERT book of Geography of class 10th. 5 seconds. Start. The resources which can be renewed or reproduced by physical, chemical, or mechanical processes are known as renewable or replenishable resources. For example, solar and wind energy, water, forests and wildlife, etc. The renewable resource may further be divided into continuous or flow. These occur over a very long geological time. Minerals and fossils fuels are examples of such resources. These resources take millions of years in their formation. Some of the resources, like metals, are recyclable, and some, like fossil fuels, cannot be recycled and get exhausted with their use. These are also owned privately by individuals. Many farmers own land which is allotted to them by government against the payment of revenue. In villages, there are people with land ownership, but there are many who are landless. Urban people own plots, houses, and other property. Plantation, pasture, lands, ponds, water in wells, etc. are some of the examples of resources ownership by individuals. Make a list of resources owned by your household. There are resources which are accessible to all the members of the community. Village commons, grazing grounds, burial grounds, village ponds, etc., public parks, picnic spots, playgrounds in urban areas are de facto accessible to all the people living there. Technically, all the resources belong to the nation. The country has legal powers to acquire even private property for public good. You might have seen roads, canals, railways being constructed on fields owned by some individuals. Urban development authorities get empowered by the government to acquire land. All the minerals, water resources, forests, wildlife, land within the political boundaries and oceanic area up to 12 nautical miles from the coast termed as territorial water and resources therein belong to the nation. There are international institutions which regulate some resources. The oceanic resources beyond 200 nautical miles of the coastline of the country belong to open ocean, and no individual country can utilize these without the concurrence of international institutions. Resources which are found in a region but have not been utilized. For example, the western parts of India, particularly Rajasthan and Gujarat, have enormous potential for the development of wind and solar energy, but so far these have not been developed properly. Resources which are surveyed and their quality and quantity have been determined for utilization. The development of resources depends on technology and level of their feasibility. Materials in the environment which have the potential to satisfy human needs, but human beings do not have the appropriate technology to access these are included among stock. For example, water is a compound of two gases, hydrogen and oxygen. Hydrogen can be used as a rich source of energy, but we do not have advanced technical know-how to use it for this purpose. Hence, it can be considered as stock. Reserves are the subset of the stock which can be put into use with the help of existing technical know-how, but their use has not been started. These can be used for meeting future requirements. River water can be used for generating hydroelectric power, but presently it is being utilized only to a limited extent. Thus, the water in the dams, forests, etc. is a reserve which can be used in the future. Planning is the widely accepted strategy for judicious use of resources. It has importance in a country like India, which has enormous diversity in the availability of resources. There are regions which are rich in certain types of resources but are deficient in some other resources. There are some regions which can be considered self-sufficient in terms of the availability of resources, and there are some regions which have acute shortage of some vital resources. For example, the states of Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and Madhya Pradesh are rich in minerals and coal deposits. Arunachal Pradesh has abundance of water resources but lacks in infrastructural development. The state of Rajasthan is very well endowed with solar and wind energy but lacks in water resources. The cold desert of Ladakh is relatively isolated from the rest of the country. It has very rich cultural heritage, but it is deficient in water, infrastructure, and some vital minerals. This calls for balanced resource planning at the national, state, regional, and local levels. Resource planning is a complex process which involves identification and inventory of resources across the regions of the country. This involves surveying, mapping, and qualitative and quantitative estimation and measurement of the resources. Evolving a planning structure endowed with appropriate technology, skill, and institutional setup for implementing resource development plans. Matching the resource development plans with overall national development plans. India has made concerted efforts for achieving the goals of resource planning right from the first 5-year plan launched after independence. The availability of resources is a necessary condition for the development of any region, but mere availability of resources in the absence of corresponding changes in technology and institutions may hinder development. There are many regions in our country that are rich in resources, but these are included in economically backward regions. On the contrary, there are some regions which have a poor resource base, but they are economically developed. The history of colonization reveals that rich resources in colonies were the main attractions for the foreign invaders. It was primarily the higher level of technological development of the colonizing countries that helped them to exploit resources of other regions and establish their supremacy over the colonies. Therefore, resources can contribute to development only when they are accompanied by appropriate technological development and institutional changes. India has experienced all this in different phases of colonization. Therefore, in India, development in general and resource development in particular does not only involve the availability of resources, but also the technology, quality of human resources, and the historical experiences of the people. Resources are vital for any developmental activity, but irrational consumption and overutilization of resources may lead to socio-economic and environmental problems. To overcome these problems, resource conservation at various levels is important. this had been the main concern of the leaders and thinkers in the past. For example, Gandhiji was very apt in voicing his concern about resource conservation. Stop.